learning session. My name is Arpan Banerjee. I am a research scholar at the Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi, and academic counselor at IGNU. Today I am going to teach you the paper which is Administrative Thinkers. The code of the paper is BPAC 132. So let us begin. Now, before starting with the paper, let me first introduce you all to the course outline of what we are going to study in this paper. So there are total of 5 blocks in this paper, which are further divided into units. So the first block is regarding Indian thinkers. Amongst Indian thinkers, we have Kautilya and Mahatma Gandhi. The second block is regarding classical thinkers, in which we have Woodrow Wilson, the former US president. The second very important classical thinker that we have is Frederick Winslow Taylor, who gave the concept of scientific management. Then, next up, we have Henry Fayol. After that, we have Max Weber and his concept of bureaucracy. Then we have Mary Parker Follett. So this was the second block, that is classical thinkers. Now moving on, in the third block, which is regarding behavioral and systems thinkers. So in that we have Elton Mayo as the first thinker in the block 3. Total, this is the 8th unit, if you see. Then we have Chester Bernard, and afterwards we have Herbert Simon. Now, if we talk about block 4 of our course, we have the socio-psychological thinkers. And the first of the socio-psychological thinkers is Abraham Maslow. Maslow's hierarchy, we will study in that. The next thinker we have is Rensis Likert. And after that, we have Frederick Herzberg and Chris Argyris. Now, if you look at the final block of our syllabus, of our course, that is regarding management and public policy thinkers, where we have 3 thinkers basically. The first one being Dwight Waldo, the second being Peter Drucker, and finally we have Ezekiel Dror. So total of 17 thinkers we have, starting from Kautilya and ending at Ezekiel Dror. Now, moving on, in today's class, we are going to study the first block, that is Indian thinkers. Now, as I told you people, that in Indian thinkers, we have 2 thinkers, Kautilya and Mahatma Gandhi. Now, I'm going to give you a brief introduction of both these thinkers. So, as we all know, Kautilya, who is also known as Chanakya or Vishnugupta, has attracted a lot of attention from scholars. Now, not only in the field of public administration that we are studying, but if you see in political science and also nowadays in international relations and foreign policy, defense studies and strategic studies, given the current geopolitical scenario, if you see Kautilya's thought, Kautilya's philosophy, Kautilya's works, especially the Arthashastra, that has attracted a lot of attention. However, in this paper, we are not going to study Kautilya from a IR perspective, from an international relations or strategic defense perspective. We are going to study him from purely an administrative perspective. What are the things that Kautilya enumerated in his work Arthashastra regarding administration of the state? And the second thinker, as I told you people that before moving on to the second thinker, that is Mahatma Gandhi, Kautilya, as we all know, is his seminal work, what we will call, the work by which he is known is the Arthashastra. Now, the Arthashastra was written at a time when monarchy was the form of government, and the entire administration of the state, not only the administration, the foreign policy, basically everything was centered on the king, and there was no democracy as such. It was like an absolute monarch. So that is why we see that the theme of monarchy is predominant in Kautilya's work, that is Arthashastra. And the king was not only expected to defend their own territories, but they were also expected to pursue a policy of expansionism. They were expected to expand their boundaries by waging wars and winning wars. So that is why Kautilya talks about the Chakravarti Samrat and the concept of Vijigisu, the king, that is the world emperor, the one who not only defends his frontiers but also conquers neighboring territories as well. So the Mandal theory that Kautilya gave was in context of this only, but we are not going to do that here because, as I told you, we are going to stick purely to the administrative part of Kautilya. Now, moving on, Kautilya in his book Arthashastra, he focused on a variety of dimensions regarding how a state or a government is to be run. Okay. Now, as I told you, that the predominant theme in Kautilya's work, Arthashastra, was monarchy. So, Kautilya favored a very strong state, the center of which was the king. And a state could be strong only if the king was strong. Without a strong king, there was no question of a strong state. Now, for that, in order to build a strong state with the strong king as its centerpiece, Kautilya in his work Arthashastra has prescribed a number of prerequisites, basically requirements. What are the requirements to build a strong state as well as a strong king? What the king has to do in order to build a strong state, and how the king personally should also behave. So he talks about the physical, social, political, cultural, moral, and administrative aspects of a state. So if we see his work Arthashastra, which is going to be the focus in this paper in Kautilya, if we talk about administrative ideas of Kautilya, we get that from Arthashastra, as I told you. It was divided into 6,000 sutras, which are further divided into 15 books, 150 chapters, and 180 sections. So you can see it was a very elaborate book which covered basically everything under the sky that is there in the administrative aspect of a state. So it was a very detailed book. He has covered every aspect of a state, of how to run a state, of day-to-day administration in detail. He has also mentioned about foreign policy, international relations, espionage, the maintenance of spies, all these things, but that we are not going to focus here. We're only going to talk about the administrative ideas related to public administration that Kautilya enumerated in his work. Now, the first book, that is book one of Arthashastra, is basically on the fundamentals of governance and management. The second book is about economic forms, basically how the state economy is to be run. The first book was on governance and management, second book on economy. Book 4 and 5 are on law, the law of the state. And book 6, 7, 8 deal with foreign policy. Now, moving on, the book 9 to 14 of Arthashastra is about defense, war, and warfare. And the final book is related to the methodology that has been used in writing Arthashastra. Now, Moving on to our most important topic regarding Kautilya, that is going to be the focus of this class, that is the principles of public administration that Kautilya has enumerated in his work Arthashastra. Now, Kautilya did not separately give any principles of administration that, say, classical thinkers like Frederick Winslow Taylor or Woodrow Wilson or Henry Fayol they did. Those principles, they are dispersed in the different books that compose the Arthashastra. So we just discussed the 15 books. Now he did not specifically discuss any principles of public administration. However, those principles we have to find from his different books, and that is why we are going to use the methodology of Luther Gulick and Lyndall Arwick, who gave 14 principles, of which are very famous. So basically, Luther Gulick gave 14 principles and Lyndall Arwick gave 7 principles. Now, on the basis of those principles, we are going to find that we're going to see what the Arthashastra or what Kautilya talks about those things in his work, that is Arthashastra. Okay, so the very first thing, the very first principle that we are going to focus on, the principle of public administration, that is division of work. Now, this is a principle that Luther Gulick and Lyndall Arwick they talk about. So we are going to take their framework, the framework of Luther Gulick and Lyndall Arwick, and based on that framework, we are going to see what Kautilya talks about those things. Okay, so the first principle, that is division of work. Now, division of work is basically division of labor, which is very important for any state if it has to be run efficiently and effectively. Division of work is very important, and that is why Kautilya he also divided work into several departments which were based on specialization. So assigning different roles to different persons according to their skills, their specialization and their knowledge, so that the work is performed in a prudent and profitable way. There is no overlapping, there is no confusion. Okay, there is order, not chaos. So for that, he assigned different roles to different persons based on their skills and their specialization and their knowledge. Now, so Kautilya in his Arthashastra, he divided work into 34 departments. Each department was headed by a designated officer. So there were 34 departments, and the people who were in those departments, they were assigned those departments on the basis of their skill, their knowledge, and their specialization. Okay, so say if someone specialized in the agriculture, then he would be assigned to the agriculture department. If someone specialized in defense, he would be he would be assigned to the defense department. So regarding that, okay. So similarly, now if we move on to the next principle, which is of course given by Gulick and Arwick, so we are using their framework, that is hierarchy. Now, regarding hierarchy, Arthashastra depicts a bureaucratic form of administration in which hierarchy is very important. The administrative structure in Arthashastra is of bureaucratic type, okay, and which is hierarchical in character. Now, if we consider the administrative structure as a pyramid, the king was at the top of the pyramid. Okay, he was the apex of the organizational pyramid, or the highest the highest level of the hierarchy in Kautilya's state, which was envisioned in Arthashastra. So the kind of administration Kautilya enumerates, in that the king is at the top of the hierarchy and he is the repository of all authority. So authority in the state, it rests in only one source, that is the king. Something similar we find later on in, if you see, Thomas Hobbes also talks about that, but that was much later in the medieval times, in the 17th century, when he talks about the Leviathan. But that is not our concern in this paper. Here Kautilya says that the king is the central authority and all authority in the state, it rests only in the king. He is the repository of all authority. He only has the authority to decide who will do what, or to give punishments or rewards, to decide the policy of the state. Okay. Now, below the king, there were many subordinate officers known as Mahamatya, Amatya, Adhyaksh, or superintendents. And also there was system of promotion and demotion also in this hierarchy, okay, which was based on merit, okay, and suitability for the position. So based on merit and suitability, there was promotion and there was demotion in this system of hierarchy. However, the final authority, it rested with the king, who was the repository of all authority. Beneath him, there were these subordinate officers like Mahamatya, Amatya, Adhyaksh, or superintendents, who could be demoted or promoted according to their work, okay, and also on the basis of their merit. But the policy making, the final policy making power rested with the king, because Kautilya favored a strong state, and for him stability and order was the most important thing. Nothing was more important than that. Okay. Now moving on, if we see the next principle which we find in Kautilya's Arthashastra is unity of command. So, as I discussed in the previous principle also, if you see regarding hierarchy, the king was the source of all authority. So, similarly, all employees under the king, they were to seek orders only from the king. There was no other authority from which they would get the order. So, every order had the seal of the king. Without that, no orders could be issued. Okay. So, that is why there was no confusion at any level of government. Because for Kautilya, stability and order was the most important thing. Okay, he wanted to avoid chaos at all costs. Chaos is described as Matsya Nyaya by him, where the big fish eats the strong fish. So he wanted to avoid that. That is why there was a unity of command that we find in Kautilya's work Arthashastra, and which ensured that there was no confusion at any level of the government, and the king alone had the power to issue orders to the subordinates in any department. Okay, and however, in his work, we do not find whether communication between the king and the subordinate officers, there was direct communication, or was that communication through some other officer. That is not clear from his work. Okay, so it is not clear whether the king directly communicated to the subordinate officer, or he did it through other officers or ministers. Okay. Now, that is why regarding this, the question whether the king used to be in direct conversation with the head of the department of elephants. So, there was a department of elephants enumerated in his work, Arthashastra. The question whether the king was in direct conversation with the head of this elephant department, or whether he was conversing with them through the Senapati or the Mahamatya, that is the high ranking officer, is not clear. So, we do not know. Although there was unity of command, but we do not know whether the king directly communicated with the heads of the departments, of the respective departments that we talked about, 34 departments, or whether he did it through the ministers, that is ministers or the high ranking civil servants, that is the Mahamatyas. Okay. Now moving on, the next principle is of course centralization. Now, as we discussed, that king was the repository of all authority, and Kautilya favored a strong state, because for him stability was of utmost important, more important than anything else. That is why it was a centralized state, not a decentralized one. Okay, nowadays we are focusing more on decentralization, but in case of Kautilya, we find that his focus was on centralization for the purpose of smooth execution of policies and decisions framed at the center. So that is why the administration was organized under close supervision of the center. So the center was all pervasive. Okay, it penetrated to every level of the government. No one could hide anything from the center. So it was a centralized state, sort of a unitary state, you can say. But of course, provincial governments were there, but they did not have any autonomous power. They did not have any autonomy. At the end of the day, it was the king who had to decide everything. So that is why every aspect of administration was under close supervision of the center till the very grassroots level. Okay, so administrative autonomy was not there. Something we will see in when we do Mahatma Gandhi, that he focused on decentralization and giving autonomy to the villages. But Kautilya, we can say, was exactly opposite of that, because Kautilya feared that if that was done, if every province and every local level government was given autonomy to decide their own administrative policies, that could wreak havoc to the state, and that could disrupt the unity and stability of the state, and could result in what he calls Matsya Nyaya. So that is why every aspect of the administration, policy, decisions, everything was under close supervision of the center. Okay, for the purpose of smooth execution. And as I said, the empire was divided into provinces, and provincial administration was further divided into the district, village, and municipal administration. This was only for administrative efficiency purposes. These provinces or districts and villages, they did not have any autonomy as such. Okay, the Pradeshtha was the head of the provincial administration, whereas the Sthanika headed the district, which was called the Sthaniya, and the Nagar administration was looked after by the Nagarika. So for the province, for the district, and for the city or the Nagar, there were separate heads. Something of that sort we find today also, right? So for the state, we have the governor as the nominal head and the chief minister as the de facto head. At the district level, we have the district magistrate, who is the head of the administration, right? So a similar sort of arrangement we find during Kautilya's time also. Okay, and the rural administration was under the charge of an employee known as the Gopa. Okay, so this was centralization. Now, moving on this same topic, on this same framework, that is centralization. For Kautilya, centralization of power and decision making was imperative for safety, security, and prosperity of the empire. So, why he focused on centralization of power? Because he believed that if power was centralized, it would ensure the safety, security, and prosperity of the empire, and also there would be some sort of administrative loyalty to the king as well. No one would dare to rebel against the king if there was centralization. Okay. The other reasons for centralization was that he believed if centralization was there, agriculture could be promoted in a better way. The maintenance and collection of data would become more smooth and efficient, and also manufactures and minings and marketplaces, they also could be maintained better. So he said that all these things like agriculture, promoting agriculture, maintaining data and collecting data in an efficient way, and also promoting manufacture and mining, all these things should be done in an efficient way, which would, by the king, which would generate a consent among the people towards centralization. If the king does these things efficiently, if he promotes agriculture, if he promotes manufacture and mining, if he maintains the marketplaces, it would lead to some sort of a consent. It's some sort of a tacit acceptance amongst the people. The people would accept the central concentration of the authority. However, if the king fails to do all these things, if the king fails to promote agriculture, if the king fails in the collection and maintenance of data, fails in manufacturing and mining, or in maintaining the marketplaces, the people may rebel. So that is why Kautilya focuses on these things. He says that if these things are done well by the state or by the king, then people will also accept the concentration of authority. They will also not rebel. Okay, because Kautilya's, as I said, as I repeated earlier as well, that Kautilya's utmost concern was stability and order, social well-being, and material prosperity, which according to him could only be achieved through a centralized system of governance. Okay, and in order to take decisions, the king could consult the officials and the council of ministers. Okay, and he could also take inputs from below, from the different departmental officers, in order to arrive at correct decisions. So that is why Kautilya also emphasized on participatory rule making. He was not a proponent of autocracy. The king could not take decisions according to Kautilya. The king was not allowed to take decisions at his whims and fancies. He had to consult the officials and the council of ministers, and he also had to take inputs from the grassroots level. Okay, so Kautilya said that sitting only in the capital and taking all the decisions without visiting the district, that could prove to be catastrophic, disastrous for the king. That is why Kautilya said that the king had to take inputs from below and had to consult his officials like the Amatyas and the Mahamatyas, and also he had to take inputs from the grassroots level. Now, the next part, the next important thing that we find in regarding administration in his work Arthashastra is authority and accountability. Now, for Kautilya, authority and responsibility went hand in hand. Okay, and that is why the king was not only vested with all powers of the state, but he's also made responsible for the progress and happiness of these subjects. So not only does he wield all the power, he is also responsible for the progress and happiness of his subjects. So he's like a father figure. Okay, so he had to use his authority in order to promote the progress and happiness of his subjects. Kautilya believed in a system of authority and prescribed a number of punishments for offenses on the part of the people as well as government servants. So, in order to preserve authority, Kautilya prescribed certain punishments. Okay, for those who defied that authority, and also punishments for those officials who misused their authority. Okay, who engaged in unfair practices. So there were punishments for both, for the officials as well as for the people. So authority had to be maintained, and it had to be exercised in a just way. It could not be exercised arbitrarily. Okay, so in order to maintain the sanctity of authority, he prescribed certain punishments. Okay, and also he said that public officials should be answerable, they should be accountable to the law of the state, and responsibility for an officer's work or actions was not to be seen merely in a legal framework. It has to be judged in a perspective of professional conduct and ethics. Okay, so not only the official not only had to affirm to the legal frameworks, no, that was not enough, but it had to be seen, the official's work had to be seen from a perspective of professional conduct and ethics, including the extent to which an employee's action or behavior promotes or hinders the values of justice, equality, and morality. So, an official's actions were to be judged on the basis of justice, equity, and morality. On the basis of these things, it is not that he only affirmed to the constitutional principles or to the laws that have been mentioned in Arthashastra. That only was not enough. He had to promote justice, equity, and morality, and based on that, his conduct was to be judged according to Kautilya. And that is why Kautilya attached great importance to legal, moral, and ethical dimensions as well. So, legal, moral, and ethical dimensions of public administration were given utmost importance by Kautilya in order to maintain accountability. And that is why there is a detailed description in Arthashastra of the methods and procedures using which an official had to perform his duties. And also, these methods and procedures were prescribed for the king as well. So the king was not outside this framework. The king also had accountability and answerability. And the king also had to follow certain legal, moral, and ethical methods and procedures. So the king also had certain duties. Okay, so the king, although the king wielded a lot of power and the king wielded authority, however, there was also an element of accountability. The king was also accountable to the people and answerable to the people. Okay, and he also prescribed the just process through which the performance of the officials should be analyzed, and based on that they could be either promoted or they could be demoted. Okay, so and another very important thing that Kautilya says in his Arthashastra is he gives precedence, he gives more importance to organizational interest over individual interest. So individual interest goes to the background for Kautilya. Interest is not the most important. The most important thing for Kautilya is the organizational interest. Okay, and the interest of the king were to keep above every other interest. Okay, loyalty to the king and the kingdom was the first and the last condition for anyone to enter and remain under the service of the state. So loyalty to the king is what he says is the most important thing, and the king himself represented the state as well as the bureaucracy and the organizational structure of the state. So he was a figurehead, and for him, loyalty, for Kautilya, loyalty was more important than anything else. Okay, and that is why he puts the personal interest in the background and puts the organizational interest at the foremost, at the front. Okay, moving on, if you see, the next important thing that we find in Kautilya's work is discipline, and there's a lot of emphasis on discipline and if the officials did not affirm to the principles of discipline, that if they did not adhere to these discipline, they could be punished also. Okay, and the next thing is coordination. Okay, so coordination was important for Kautilya in order to establish harmonious and integral working of the government machinery. Okay, because he says that a chariot cannot be pulled only with one wheel. It can be pulled only when the two wheels coordinate. Okay, so that is why coordination has been given utmost importance in his work, Arthashastra, in order to establish harmonious and integral working of the government. And it was the duty of the king. The Kautilya vests the king with this duty to not only act as the chief coordinator, but it is also imperative for each head of the department or section to command and coordinate the functioning of his subordinates. So not only the king has been made the chief coordinator, but every head of the department also has a duty to command and coordinate the functioning of his subordinates. Okay, to ensure coordination in his department. However, the king at the end of the day was the chief coordinator, and they were all answerable to the king, and of course, loyalty to the king was of utmost importance. Now, the next thing is direction. Okay, in administration, direction is a very important thing, and it involves a number of attributes for effective performance of the employees. Okay, so that is why Kautilya recognized the relevance of direction and of effective leadership, which was very important for smooth running of the government. According to Kautilya, effective leadership was very important. Okay, so that is why he said that the leader had to be completely engrossed in the work of the organization and in the working of the employees. And regarding leadership only, Kautilya says that an ideal king is one who behaves like a sage monarch. He is like Raj Rishi, who is active in promoting Yogakshem. Okay, Yogakshem of the people. Now, Yogakshem is a combination of two words, that is yoga, or successful accomplishment of an objective, and shame, peaceful enjoyment of prosperity. And according to Kautilya, a good leader is one who keeps the interests of people and the kingdom above personal interest. And of course, a lot of importance was also attached by Kautilya to supervision and control. And he also brought the concept of value-based management, and he prescribed certain values. For example, a leader should be virtuous, truthful, and free from vices. He should also invoke reliability, gratefulness, liberality, and he should also have a long-term vision. So these are the values that Kautilya recommends. Okay, and in the organization and structure of Kautilya's administrative machinery, as we said, the king was the centerpiece of this organization structure. Okay, as I discussed, the king was the repository of all authority. He was the centerpiece of the organizational structure because Kautilya prescribed a unitary monarchical system of governance, and the king was the source of law, and loyalty to the king was more important than anything else because he was at the apex of the pyramid. Okay, and however, the king did not have unrestrained power. Okay, his role and methods of discharging that role were defined, and there were provisions of punishment also for the king if the king was found wanting in being just and fair in the use of his authority. If the king did not use his authority fairly, or if he behaved unjustly, then he could be punished also. There was dand also for the king if he fails to perform his duties. Okay, so the king was not outside the law, he was within the law. He had to perform his duties, otherwise he would be punished. And Kautilya mentioned a time schedule for the king. Basically, he gave a time schedule, a timetable for the king. For every deliberate thing, there was a timetable that regarding everything he needed to do, when he needed to meet his defense, revenue, and expenditure officials, when was the time to hear the petitions of the people, to receive revenue tributes. Everything was minutely described. When should the king go and receive secret information from the spies? Okay, when should he go to sleep? When should he wake up? Every single aspect of the king's everyday life, day-to-day life, was minutely described by him because according to Kautilya, the most important functional duty of the king was to ensure well-being of his subjects. Okay, this is the only thing that could make a king happy, if he ensured the well-being of his subjects. And also he had to guarantee, the king had to guarantee the prosperity and economic growth of the state. Okay, so that is why, for the purpose of prosperity, economic growth, and in order to so that the king can ensure the well-being of his subjects, Kautilya prescribes a minute time schedule for the as per which the king had to act, had to spend his entire day. Okay, and there were besides the king certain other officials also who occupied high positions like Purohit, chief priest, Mahamatya, Senapati. Okay, Mahamatya basically is the higher ranking civil servants, and Amatyas are the civil servants. Okay, and as I told you, there were 34 departments into which his administration was divided. So departments were there for revenue, defense, agriculture, and horses, jails, mints for coins. Likewise, and every department had different heads, which you can see here: Koshadhyaksh, Lakshanadhyaksh, okay, Khanadhyaksh. So there were adhyaksh, and there were heads for every department, weights and measures, jewelry, and it is very detailedly described in Kautilya's work. Okay, and also, as I told you earlier also regarding when we had begun this lesson, that the heads of this department were assigned on the basis of their knowledge, their specialization. Okay, and on the basis of their merit, so that this was done so that lethargy, corruption, and inefficiency and routineness could be avoided. Okay, and there was also a system of promotion and demotion as well, and recruitment was on the basis of tests in order to weed out the incompetent people. Okay, so there was promotion and there was demotion, rewards and punishment, which all depended on the king. And as I told you, there was tests like we have today, the UPSC civil services exam that we have. Similarly, there were tests also to recruit at that time also, to recruit civil servants. Those who passed the Dharmopad test were placed as Dharmasthiya, and similarly, there were different tests for different departments. Okay, and there were also, if you see, there were also certain qualities that were prescribed for the Amatyas or the civil servants. This should The civil servant or the Amatya should be a citizen of the state, should be from a high family, should be well trained in arts, Okay, he should have wisdom, intelligence, foresight, should be energetic, skillful. Okay, he should have loyal devotion to the king. And also there is detailed description of the salaries of the official as well, which could be increased or decreased based on his performance. And finally, if we see, Kautilya also focused on financial administration, and for him, financial health of the state was very important, and that is why, for tax purpose collection, the entire state as well as the villages also were divided into tax paying and non-tax paying villages. Okay, and also treasury was very important, maintaining that a healthy balance in the treasury. And there was a separate official who was known as the superintendent of the treasury, that is sama nidhatra. Okay, the sama nidhatra was the superintendent of the treasury, and the king exercised direct control over the treasury, and the koshadhyaksh of the treasury was accountable directly to the king in order to maintain financial health of the state. And that is why he gave very much importance to the treasury, utmost importance to the treasury. And Kautilya said that it was the duty of the officers concerned to raise, strengthen, and increase the resources, and that should be done not in an arbitrary or unfair manner. Okay, the treasury should be strengthened, but not in an unfair or undue or arbitrary manner. Okay, so that is why financial health was very important. Villages were divided into tax paying and non-tax paying ones. Okay, in order to collect taxes. And the treasury was given a lot of emphasis in Arthashastra, and the head of the superintendent of the treasury was known as the Samnidhatra. And the king maintained direct supervision over the health of the treasury through the Koshadhyaksh. And Kautilya also talks about budget. So the concept of budget also was there. Okay, statement of revenue and expenditure was also presented, and there were account officials, and there was auditing of accounts. Something that we see today, the CAG, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, what he does today. Similar system was there. Auditing system was there in Kautilya's time also. And if there were discrepancy found in that audit, people could be punished. They could be penalized as well. Those who were responsible for these discrepancies, and those who cheated or misappropriated government funds or engaged in financial misbehavior, they could be severely punished after investigation. So there was all the things that we find today in our country. We can say Kautilya envisioned those things thousands of years ago. So you can see his foresight. Okay. Now, finally, concluding our first thinker in our first block, the main features I'm going to discuss in conclusion of Kautilya, that it was a centralized system that Kautilya favored. Kautilya favored a bureaucratic system as part of his administrative system. He favored a centralized one. He favored a bureaucratic system, and also the administrative principles that classical thinkers, expounded later on. If you see in the 19th century, we find many of those principles in Kautilya also. So the principles that the likes of Frederick Winslow Taylor or Woodrow Wilson or Henry Fayol or Luther and Gulick, on whom we have focused in this lecture, they expounded those principles in the 19th century. However, we find many of those principles or similar principles in Kautilya also. And although he prescribed an authoritarian system where the king was the head, there was centralization of authority. However, he was also very careful to the needs of good administration or good governance. Okay, so this was our first unit of the first block, that is Kautilya. Now, if we move on, the next thinker that we are going to discuss today, that I'm going to introduce today, uh, that is Mahatma Gandhi. Now we all know Gandhiji, who is referred to as the father of our nation. Uh, he was, of course, we are going to study him from his perspective of theory of trusteeship. Okay, that is what we are going to study in this paper. And if you see, his emphasis was exactly opposite. His thoughts were kind of exactly opposite to that of Kautilya, because Kautilya favored centralization, that we have just seen, all powerful king, all pervasive authority, the state penetrating to the lowest level of governance. Mahatma Gandhi, on the other hand, he preferred autonomy for the villages, decentralization, what he called village republics. He said that India was a collection of village republics, and his focus was more on Gram Swaraj and Panchayati Raj. These were his focus. Okay, so as we all know that he was a charismatic leader who played a very important role in our freedom struggle. Born in a merchant family in Gujarat, he took formal training in law from South Africa, where he also fought against apartheid. And after coming back, he, using his methods of non-violence and satyagraha, he led several movements, starting from the Rolat Satyagraha to the non-cooperation movement to the civil disobedience movement, and culminating in the Quit India movement. And he's called one of the torch bearers of our freedom struggle. Okay, that is why he has been described, he has been referred to as the father of the nation. And he is considered, of course, a champion figure of our freedom struggle. And as I mentioned, principles of non-violence and satyagraha were central to his thought. Okay, now moving on, in this paper, in this unit, we are going to focus on Gandhiji's idea of Swaraj. Okay, that is going to be the first thing that we are going to emphasize on. And he was a firm believer in the philosopher of Swaraj and democratic values, but his conception towards democratic republic is different from the Western thinkers. So the conceptions that we find in the Western thinkers, they are different from that of Gandhiji. Okay, Gandhiji's concept of Swaraj and Gandhiji's concept of democracy and republicanism is different from the ones that we find, say, in the Western thinkers, like John Stuart Mill or John Locke, Jeremy Bentham, the Western political thinkers that were there. Their conception and Gandhiji's conception is different, because Gandhiji wanted Swaraj or self rule by the people of India who represent the rural masses. Okay, the rural masses were at the center, and he wanted this Swaraj to become a reality of India. That is why Gandhiji said that the soul of India lives in its villages. Okay, so that is why he placed a lot of emphasis on conserving the villages, because according to him, if the villages were not conserved, the soul of India itself would get corrupted. That is why he said that instead of a top down structure, he preferred a bottom up structure. Okay, bottom up power structure. So he said that power structure should begin from below, and Gandhiji wanted true democracy to function in India. He therefore observed true democracy cannot be worked by 20 men sitting at the center. It has to be worked from below by people of every village. So true democracy for him was not just a few bureaucrats and ministers sitting in the capital and taking all the decisions, or a few parliamentarians, uh, or the council of ministers sitting in the parliament or in the secretariat and taking all the decisions. It had to come from the below, from the village. So the role of the Gram Sabha is very important. That is why he emphasized a lot on Panchayati Raj, on strengthening the panchayats, because according to him, that could ensure Gram Swaraj. Okay. And that is why Gandhiji's dream was that of democracy through people's participation, which could only be ensured by Gram Swaraj. Okay, so as I told you, every he said that India is a collection of village republics, and every village is like an autonomous republic where all the affairs of the village could be managed only by the people themselves. Okay, and every village, according to Gandhiji, should be a democracy in which they will not depend even on their neighbors for major circles. So that is why he gives the concept of concentric circles, right? So there are concentric circles. So the big village is like the bigger circle. So when we drop a stone in the ocean, the water, it creates circles, right? That is what he refers to. That the big village is the bigger circle. The circle after that refers to the next bigger village, and the smallest circle refers to the smallest village. Okay, and everyone is interdependent on each other. However, every village or every circle is autonomous as well, has an autonomous existence. So the concept of concentric circles and Gram Swaraj are also correlated if we see in Gandhiji. And he said that no one should be without food and clothing. Everyone should get sufficient work to meet one's necessities. This ideal can be achieved only when the means of production to meet the primary needs of life are in control of the people. So, nutrition, clothing, work, sufficient work, these are the things he said that are of utmost importance. That is why he was opposed also to he was also opposed to mechanization of labor. He preferred human labor more than machines. Okay, he was critical of machines also, and that is why he says that all these means of production that are required to meet primary needs of life should be in control of the people and not the state. Okay, so he was against a sort of state-led industrialization. Rather, he preferred cottage industries at the village level. That could ensure Gram Swaraj, according to Gandhiji. And the vision of an ideal village or village republic is central to Gandhiji's concept of Swaraj. And Gandhiji further says that this ideal village or village republic is based on non-violent social and economic order. Okay, where the production of necessary items are done by small scale cottage industries and not by the big industries. Okay, so instead of the model that we followed after independence, Gandhiji was not in favor of that. So we followed the model of state-led industrialization, much on the pattern of the Soviet Union, right? But Gandhiji was not in favor of that. Okay, he was not in favor of the economic model that Pandit Nehru envisioned. Rather, he said that villages should be strengthened and production of necessary items should be done by small scale cottage industries in the village, not in the cities. So villagers should not have to leave their village. They should not have to migrate to the cities. Okay, that should be ensured. Whatever production they had to do it in the village only. That would strengthen the village republic also. So Gandhiji says that without decentralized order of production, Gandhian ideal village is not possible. Okay, so according to Gandhiji, ideal village is a forms the centerpiece of Gandhiji's decentralized economic order, which can only be constructed if power is given to the people. Okay, and political structure under Gandhian ideal village can be constructed only on the basis of production of economic structure. So the political structure dependent on the economic structure, and the economic structure had to be village centered. Okay, the economic structure had to be village centered. And as I said earlier also, he advocated decentralization of economic and political power through organization of village panchayats. And that is why he gave the concept of Gram Swaraj and said that every village should be its own republic. And he proposed to work from bottom to upwards. And that is why he said independence must begin from the bottom, and every village, which is referred to as village republic, should have full powers. Okay. Now I'm going to discuss a little bit about Gandhiji's concept of trusteeship. So, according to him, Gandhiji, he was not in favor of either capitalism or communism. Okay, he gave the theory of trusteeship, which said that land should be jointly owned by the capitalist and the by the industrialist and the people. Okay, land should be jointly owned, and the owners of the land should act as should treat the workers who are working on their lands as their own children. There should be coordinator between the owners and the workers. So land and means of production resources, they should be jointly owned so that there is no conflict as such. Okay, we'll further discuss this in the next class, this theory of economic trusteeship, which is very important. So now I'm going to before we finish, I'm going to discuss what we have discussed in our class today. So the concept of in Mahatma Gandhi, I have discussed, which is the second unit of our syllabus. I have discussed the concept of Gram Swaraj, right? Self-sufficient village republics, which are to have political and economic autonomy, and the economic base of a state economic structure should be bottom up rather than top down. Okay, I also told you about the concept of concentric circles. Okay, and also before that we discussed Kautilya and Kautilya's principles of administration, right? How he preferred a centralized system, okay, and in which the king was given all the authority. If we go back, how Kautilya preferred a centralized system in which the king had all the authority. Work was divided between different departments, okay, and there was a hierarchy, and officials were promoted on the basis of merit. And because the king had all the powers to issue orders, there was a unity of command. And of course, centralization, I discussed with you people. Centralization was very important, as well as accountability and authority were very important for Kautilya, and loyalty to the king preceded anything else. Okay, for Kautilya, and the concept of discipline also was given importance, and in order to avoid matsya or chaos. So for Kautilya, stability was the most important thing, without which there would be chaos. So these are the things that I've discussed: the importance of direction, effective leadership, and how the duty of the king is to enforce yogakshem, right? That is successful and peaceful enjoyment of prosperity. That is the king's duty. And also value-based management, the values that Kautilya prescribes for the king. And also I discussed with you people how the king was also not outside the law, and there were punishments for the king if the king did not prescribe, if the king did not affirm to the duties that had been laid down for the king. So all these things, also the minute time schedule that Kautilya gave for the king. So all these things I had discussed in detail for Kautilya, also regarding the civil servants as well, how they were recruited, how they were promoted and demoted. And finally, I discussed with you people the Kautilya's ideas on financial administration, budget, the financial health of the king was also accountable and responsible. Okay, and the how the treasury should be maintained, how a healthy treasury should be maintained, and budget and audit was also, I have also discussed that those uh, who were found to commit cheating or financial misbehavior, they were punished. Okay, so these are the things that I've discussed, and in the next class, I'm going to discuss the Gandhiji's theory of economic trusteeship in detail. Today, we have only discussed uh, the concept of Gram Swaraj by Gandhiji, and in the next class, we are going to continue Gandhiji's concept of trusteeship, and also we are going to bring in Acharya Vinoba Bhave as well.